Next, let's queer up gay culture. Alexander Millar brings groundbreaking festival for neurodivergent and disabled communities. Queer News Tonight has been centric to the needs of our queer disabled communities. We were happy to learn Alexander Millar, also known as Vatica, is spearheading Los Angeles' first ever mini festival tailored to the needs of the neurodivergent and disabled communities. Named Neuro Night, the event will take place on Friday, July 26th at the Innovative Media Pollution Warehouse Space. As a queer non-binary neurodivergent individual with lifelong OCD, Alex Millar's personal experiences inspired this initiative. Neuro Night aims to prioritize and celebrate neurodivergent individuals, both on and off stage. The festival will showcase artistic works by those often underrepresented in mainstream events due to lack of access and opportunity. Additionally, it seeks to create a live show environment that centers on the comfort and needs of the neurodivergent community. The festival features performances by Vatica, Alicia Cherie, and Frankie Simone. With merchants and food vendors present, the Neuro Night team has designed the space with COVID safety, overstimulation, and community care in mind. A live stream will be available for those unable to attend in person. Supported by the California Arts Council and administered by the community partners, Neuro Night represents a radical reimagining of conventional concerts, advocating for inclusion, celebration, and community engagement. I think this is pretty groundbreaking. To take again, we're talking about marginalized communities inside marginalized communities, and an individual standing up and saying, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to make people feel included and that they have a voice, and do it in a respectful way, that with the overstimulation, like knowing who your audience is and making it so that they can attend and be comfortable and not have a negative reaction because it sets off some of the issues that they face personally. So,
As someone who was diagnosed with ADHD and has dealt with doctors and all that, it was really nice to read about this story. Like, both me and my significant other, love you, I'm not going to name you because I don't even want to be out on this. He's on the autism spectrum. So, like, the two of us, like, understanding, like, the overstimulation and taking, like, it was just really nice to hear. And then I heard of the LA. I was like, should be in South Florida. Come on. Like, we'd love that down here.
Well, where LA goes, everyone follows. So what is very important about this for me, my takeaway is that I experience severe dyslexia. And to have a space where I can feel comfortable and not worrying about, am I reading the sign right or whatever you experience, I think everyone needs to be included. And we began this journey a long time ago when we started to have sign language at our events. And I believe this is the natural progression of where we need to go, that everyone's welcome to this table. Everyone's welcome. So I'm really all for this. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think into that too, it's just drawing greater attention and awareness to a much larger community than most people realize, because a lot of these things are invisible disabilities, because they're not things that you're going to see, and also encompass more than just mental, but also, social emotional disturbances as well, or challenges, I should say, not disturbances, but, and just recognizing that these people also desire community.
Matthew, because you work in the school system.
You're a teacher, yeah.
So you're a teacher and educator of youth. Like, what has your experience been, and how has it been addressed, and what have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. There's been a lot of larger conversations around students with exceptionalities, which is, how we look at it in an education system, which would include, both social, neurological, or physical challenges or differences that students face. And it's always funny because I see my colleagues on both sides are like, oh, that's not a big, and I'm like, and we recently had a couple PDs, professional developments, about this, where we had to read what it was like for someone with dyslexia.
Right.
And like what it looks like. And I happen to be sitting next to someone who teaches English. She's like, yeah, this is what I had to overcome as someone with dyslexia. And I was like, I think for me, one of the most important things that I took away from my formation in teaching was to create the least restrictive learning environment for my students. Oh. And so just really reminding myself, especially as someone with visual impairment, like things that I can't read, I always try to prioritize, like, if I can read it, then that means someone that can't see it as well can read it as well. And just really being attentive and mindful of those smaller things, making sure the volume isn't too loud, or making sure that there's enough contrast with something, or putting on subtitles for students.
How do you address the other, say there's 20 kids in the class and there's one person has that, well, for lack of a better term, I'm misspeaking, special needs. How do you, like, where do you go with that so that the others become sensitized to human behavior and other people that are different than themselves, whether they're LGBTQ, whether they're a person of color, whether they're, any minority-based group. Like, what have you seen for that? And like, has there been one where there was such an impact that you were like, I'm so glad I did this because look, these kids are walking out of my room better educated and more sensitive to the world around us?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of that, like in my little intro, is I really just have a lot of conversations, and I ask my students tons of questions,
Educated.
And one of the things I always ask is like, especially in the beginning and as well as the end, it's like, what do I need to do to teach you better? And that often gives them a segue to talk about, well, I have dyslexia, or I have attention deficit disorder, or I struggle with procrastination, or whatever. I love it when you give us notes on paper or provide things in advance. And it just, it's that sort of running Rolodex for me of like, okay, I need to make sure that I always start from a place of what is going to allow the most amount of people to be successful in my classroom. And I also really try to create as many low stakes experiences and try to minimize stress as much as possible. So I over communicate a lot of my expectations in a variety of different ways. And I say that point blank. I said, I'm doing this so that you don't get stressed, because when you get stressed, then I get stressed, and then everyone's stressed, and we don't have time for that.
And the other thing too is we have to look at how do we do this and not make someone feel like they're marginalized when they're experiencing a learning indifference.
Right.
And so how do we bring them into the fold and make them feel like they are, they're special,
Right.
but yet they're not special.
Right.
They're part of the community.
Yeah.
And it's a bigger issue. Like if you take this, but then you also take kids that are coming to school hungry because they're from an economically, I don't know where your school is.
Under-resourced, yeah.
Under-resourced. And so like these kids can't focus because they're hungry.
They haven't eaten.
And that's a whole nother, but I almost put it in the same, even though I know it's not the same, but it's a barrier to better education,
Right.
When you have those kinds of issues happening as well.
It is, and that's why one of the things that I've, especially over my 10 years, is just not sweating the small stuff. Like, if students, like, I need to go get something to eat. Okay, go get something to eat. Like, I need you to be here. I need you to learn, but not if you're hungry. Like, that doesn't help either one of us. So go eat, go get your drink of water, go to the bathroom. Like, and I see so many of my colleagues that are like, but no, and I'm like, what's our goal at the end of the day? To teach them something. So they need to be able to do that in a way that is least restrictive. So just let it happen. The 10, 15 seconds it's going to take, or a minute and a half it's going to take, give them a chance to collect themselves, and we'll move on. And honestly, it's not that big of a deal.
My friend, he's a queer licensed social worker, and he does a lot of counseling, deals with a lot of ADHD, and how I have to explain to teachers, like, just don't sweat the small stuff. You always, like, you have so few, like, situations when you do that. That's such an important point.